You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My two guests today are Martin Lassen-Vernal and Louise Harder, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Welcome to The Only Constant, Martin and Louise. I am super thrilled to have you both on the show today. And today we are actually sitting in a completely new setting, so I'm not even remote recording or physical at the office where I work, but actually at the IT University in Copenhagen. So it's sort of, going back to the roots or something we could call it. I don't know. What did we discuss, right? So let's just start it off real quick. So you both co-developed a new method framework. I'll let you explain what it is. That's called STAIR. And that's an acronym, right, Louise? And what does the acronym stand for? So it's not physical stairs, right?
No, it's not. It stands for Socio-Technical AI Reflection. Mm-hmm. And that covers a framework that is based upon socio-technical principles, which are basically human principles or human values that needs to be, addressed when we redesign work or work systems with new technology. Then we have to meet some human principles. And it has been a long tradition at the IT University in Copenhagen that we base a lot of our perspectives and research within the socio-technical perspective. So, and it basically means that, we reach both efficiency, productivity, but also well-being and human flourishing when we introduce new technology. And so
is this sort of like, and I'll let you explain in a second, Martin, what it is, but so this is not just about you being the little ethical department in the IT University and the rest of them being building solutions and changing the world with tech, right? No, it's something different. But Martin, can you explain what is STAIR then?
So STAIR is, you could say, a methodology we co-developed with IT University. And we developed it, it's combined with the principles Louise just mentioned, the research-based principles, and the practical experience during 1.5, 2 years of implementing and having a learning program on generative AI in my department.
Your department in the Copenhagen
And I'm from the city of Copenhagen, in the technical and environmental administration. And I'm a head of a communications department, around 30 people. So during this learning program, we got in contact with the IT University, and we wanted to find a method. We wanted to talk about how could we adopt generative AI? How did it influence us? There was a lot of concern at the time, and there was certainly just a lot of questions. And we quickly came to the insight that we needed this kind of methodology to talk about it, to evaluate, and to also be reflective on how did this influence us, because we're concerned about the quality of the output of our work, or what new competences did it demand from us. And this kind of just grew into this methodology where we heavily inspired by the socio-technical tradition, adopted this and formulated these principles. So a combination of the research base, where we know what's important in terms of human factors, and the practical side of implementing it, and you can say living with generative AI during this period. And it became this set of principles. So that's the heart of STAIR. So the heart of STAIR is a set of principles, 8 principles, where we know what's important, what questions do you need to ask.
So now I'm curious. So what are these principles? Shortly maybe, or don't.
So don't go through all of them. Well, so just skating above them. So there are eight principles that covers a lot of area, and it's very important to say these are not checklists. It's not like a do or die that you have to have a positive answer or a negative answer to this principle. It's a methodology for reflecting about these different perspectives, right? So the principles I think the first principle we put on top of it is the value proposition. So here we're not trying to invent anything new, you'd say, but if you don't have a clear value proposition, then that's certainly a problem with your AI adoption or your concrete use case or whatever kind of conversation we're having. But value could be in terms of qualitative value, in terms of productivity. It could be many things.
Risk, all that, yes.
So the second is rules and guidelines. We need rules and guidelines, and these make us comfortable using the technology, and someone's taking responsibility for this. Third is you need an opportunity to learn. You need access to learning. You need time to learn, and you need to create and facilitate this culture of learning. Number fourth is you need to build your competencies. You need the option to do this, and you need the possibility to do this. And it's different from learning. So in learning taxonomy, these are two different things, right? You can learn something and not have competences. So these are two different things to be aware of. Do I need new competences when I use this technology? Mm-hmm. The fifth is we consider social aspects. So adopting the technology, replacing the whole or part of my workflow could change how I interact with my coworkers. This could be, working from home. This could be working afar from each other. But in a smaller scale, it could also mean, I don't get out to the organization as I used to because I had this process automated, so I don't need to speak with coworkers in other parts of my organization. And I realized going through this STAIR consideration, this perspective, I realized, wait, this was when I actually went out to the organization and built relationships, and I kind of branded my department. And so I need to be aware of these kind of factors. The sixth is responsibility and autonomy. So we need to maintain our responsibility. We need to know how we're responsible, and we need to feel our autonomy, right? We need to be in control of the situation. So this could also be in terms of not using the technology at all, having the option not to use the technology in a certain use case. And I'm just obviously giving short examples here. Seventh is creativity and our professional self, that we still are in contact with who we are as a professional in our organization. So I'm a communicator. I can learn to learn some things, I can unlearn some things in order to use the technology in a new way, in a new setting, in a new type of workflow. Perhaps it produces content for me. Perhaps it analyzes for me. So will I accept this? I need to be aware of this. I need to be aware that, it's helping me do something that I used to consider part of my professional work. Now it's replaced that. Am I okay with this? I may be okay with this, because it helps me in what's fundamentally my job as a communicator, is ensuring legitimacy and trustworthiness and these kind of things. But I need to be aware of this process, this change process, really. And the eighth is a large principle in itself. It's ethical considerations. And you can say it's almost belittling this, that you just put this in a principle, but the point is that this is a huge discussion in and of itself. You could dive deep into this, but you cannot overlook this aspect, that there are ethical considerations, and that these ethical considerations often will be personal and subjective, and not something you could make certain rules about. But
Louise, don't we end up with these principles? Because I think they're brilliant dimensions also to discuss, but only one of them seems to be what most C-levels would be discussing, the value prop. That's what they're interested in. What is the value proposition for us to do this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And the rest of them seems to be the things you really don't want to ask your employees about.
Well,
no, frankly,
yeah,
but saying,
yeah.
How do you feel about your creativity with this new tool? How do you feel about your responsibilities? Most people would be very resistant, right? Because they'll be answering it from the knowledge base they already have, from what they've already seen, and if they haven't seen it yet, there's this, hen and the egg, or chicken before the egg thing here, right?
Yeah. So you can only, write up these principles for your own department and your own work if you know what the technology is about. So you have some level of expertise or competence. So you know how it can affect you in a both positive way, but you have maybe also have some experiences and your own reflections around how it affects yourself. So all of these, tacit reflections is actually what we bring out now in the open, talking about it. which means that actually these principles that Martin just reiterated, they are posed more as, how to say, sentences, which means that when we adopt generative AI, we know how we create value. When we adopt generative AI, we know how it affects social relations in our team. So it's more an invitation to have an important dialogue around things we know will affect well-being and human thriving at the workplace. And if well-being goes down too much, then it will affect productivity.
But don't we also,
there is this, it's you cannot talk about productivity without also talking about how people thrive and develop in a workplace and see themselves as, a part of the bigger solution and know where you deliver value and that you feel supported by your organization and your team leader and so forth. That is what creates a thriving and productive workplace.
But it also becomes, one thing I'm worried about is sitting people down talking about how their creativity has been impacted by this. I want them to create, tribes of innovation and creativity with the technology. I don't want them to create tribes of this is stifling my There's this whole push for, which I think taking these discussions in the open is obviously, I get the point, but it also seems how is this a progressive? Is STAIR progressive? Is my answer maybe my question, not my answer. Martin.
Obviously, I would say very much so.
But how then?
So I think the answer is a lot to do with adaptiveness or adaptation, and you can say that. So we're used to being required to adapt to technology, right? This is the very traditional way of going about it. So here's a new tech, and we need to do this because we need this productivity gain. So I have to adapt to the technology, and I have to adapt the way I work. You could say, very simply put, it's nice to know that you could also make demands of the technology. You could also say that the technology also needs to adapt to us. So giving people this option of being reflective, being critical, making choices, using the technology, not using the technology. Yes, this helps you thrive, but this also helps you, the point is here, this also helps you actually evolve with the technology. So the argument here, and obviously it's an argument, and this is a new technology and we'll have to see it, but it's not more than an argument. I think that there's a lot of evidence base here, but going forward, certainly, we're going to see people adopt this technology and evolve with it, and we're saying, so you need some sort of methodology. You need to say to people, you can adopt with this technology, but you can also make demands to this technology, and you could also say how this technology. You can choose when to use this. When does it fit the way you work? When does it, hit the mark of the quality that you want? So giving people this choice, I think, is progressive. And the answer to your C's question there, that's the value proposition of STAIR, right? That if you want this productivity gain, you need to consider the human aspect of it. You need to consider the well-being of it. It's tied part and parcel.
But I also see that maybe attacking this the wrong way, right? Saying that something like that. I'm saying from those that will already be enthusiastic about technology, and then asking them to sit down and think about these things, and then they'll be more critical. But we're also talking obviously about those people who are resisting it and saying, why are you resisting it? Because then when we engage something new like generative AI or chatbots, we will do it with an a priori knowledge and worldview and system that we have in our minds, right? And we need to sort of make people step back and actually think about how they're approaching it immediately, so we don't get all this resistance, right? That's also the point, isn't it? So basically leveling the field, or what will you say?
Yes. You put it eloquently.
Exactly. So we can end it right here.
I would also say that this is also a method for, sneaking in upskilling. And we know upskilling will be very much in demand at our workplaces and the workforce, worldwide. We need 44 million people to be upskilled to actually be able to use this technology. So what we are presenting here is a way of doing that more collaboratively. So we bring everybody on board within an organization. We talk about how we use it, we learn from each other, and we then also, of course, learn how we develop our profession. How we as researchers, teachers, accountants use this where there are pitfalls, where there are challenges, where there are, low-hanging fruits. Why not share that? And then just start building that, upskilling movement. Because we need everybody on board in this.
But why is it, you have 8 principles, right? And the value prop seems to be a very big one, and the ethical consideration seems to be a very big one. So it seems like I don't know if it actually on point by choice that it was the first and the last one, like to sort of open it up, or is it the middle thing that is most important, or is it, because I also see something like, technology, especially generative AI right now, it's been very much about, a one-sided message from the lab saying, oh, this will replace everything. But it really needs to latch onto our ecosystems and our processes, and that could all. Where are the processes? Is that in the rules and guidelines? Where are things hidden here?
But so I think part of the answer is maybe we should just put some more words onto how do we actually practice STAIR. So we have the principles and the actual way we could practice it, and there's obviously many ways to do this because the principles are the heart of it. But what we've done is we have what we call STAIR sessions. So one of the reasons we call it STAIR is kind of alluding to like Scrum, or that you have a project that's conceptualized and easy to understand. So it's in some ways like a Scrum session, right? You have a session where you have we call it a STAIR master. We can't help ourselves. So you have a STAIR who facilitates the discussion.
That's a terrible word, but
it works quite well. Thus far, at least. Let's see. So this STAIR master knows obviously the principles. We know the use case in question, and facilitates a discussion, a conversation. It's a workshop, right? Basic. It's a workshop. And as I said, it's not a checklist. We don't have to go through each of the principles, but it's a conversation, a free-flowing conversation, really, where we try to navigate after where we think maybe there may be issues, but where we also identify issues during the conversation. So the principles are more for the STAIR masters, navigation through this. And we may find that, well, it's actually in rules and guidelines. They keep coming back to rules and guidelines. I have to be interested in this. So I'll ask follow-up questions here. And maybe we'll unearth that it's all about rules and guidelines. They feel insecure. So they're hyped for this idea they have, but at the same time, they're super insecure on rules and guidelines. Or it could be the social perspective that's actually bothering them. So here, STAIR is becoming a sort of risk management, right? So we identify where are the barriers. It could also obviously lead to them saying, well, then we don't want to do this. That would also be a great thing because they're taking an active, critical, informed choice now. Or they could do, mitigating actions towards the social aspects or some of these perspectives that are being, identified. So I'd say it's not value is and ethical are big issues or big principles, but we go wherever we through this free exploratory open-ended method. I think you're very well versed in this, Lasse.
It's a podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Podcast. Oh.
Yeah, and
my podcast is STAIR method. Oh no!
Exactly, it is. So yeah, we go where the conversation takes us.
But obviously, Louise, it has to be a little bit more. You're teaching socio-technical principles, right? At the IT University.
Yeah.
So it has to be a little bit more concrete as well than just saying, "Oh, we talk about anything," right? Or what is?
Yeah. It's well, first of all, it's
structured.
It's quite structured first, but it's also there are some traditional historic design principles that this whole perspective builds upon, and one of those principles are variety in work. We know if we do not have a variety in work, we will bore ourselves to death, right? We know we will not develop. We know that we will not be motivated and engaged and so forth. So that is just one example of an important principle in job design. And whenever technology is introduced, something is happening in the way we design our jobs and our work. So what the socio-technical perspective is doing for you is simply just raising a flag around, are you now in the process of taking out something that is actually so important that you do not discover you're taking it away before you actually flushed out the meaning with your work or your profession or whatever. So I know that we are a bit, how to say, ambitious upon people's desire to reflect upon the changes that they are going through themselves as individuals in an organization. And from that platform, starting to take part in a movement using this technology. So there's also another very important principle going back 50 years, which is meaning. Work needs to provide meaning in people's life. Otherwise, they will not thrive. And they will become depressed and isolated and,
Sort of like data.
Sort of like data.
So if there's they don't have master data taxonomy, if you don't have ontologies, you don't have meaning with your data, it will become isolated, become useless, it will become estranged, it will, right?
Yeah.
So I just tried to do the opposite and said, why, if we talk about this in purely IT terms, we would also want to clear up these things. Yeah. But if we talk about, sorry, I'm not talk about humans as it's endpoints, human endpoints in a process system. You need to keep these endpoints less estranged, right, to the change that's going on, to the purpose what they are doing, keep them engaged, keep them enthusiastic about what's happening, and make sure that they both have a meaning so they know where they fit, but also so that the rest of the organization know where they fit into the whole, right? So it's both of those things, right?
Yes, and that's actually also a principle, wholeness in work. You need to know, which also the KPI and, other management,
that's a big ask, right? If you're a 500,000 employee company, right? Isn't it?
Well, we've designed entire systems that works on these principles. We just don't reflect upon them. Knowing how your work delivers on the bigger mission of the company is an important principle, and we manage that through key performance indicators.
Yeah.
Just as we use Scrum methods to drive an ongoing development of something. And so this is not in the sense new or novel, besides the fact that we are asking organizations and employees and managers and team leaders and the IT department to think more in a socio-technical with a socio-technical perspective, because we know AI.
Also expanding the KPIs, right? You're changing the KPIs a little bit from what they usually are, right?
You could say that. I don't know.
Maybe a stronger emphasis on human factors and the issues here. But you're right. I mean, in scoping, these are not entirely rare terms or principles. But I think but we're still. I mean, for one thing, we're focusing on generative AI, and this is built upon generative AI at least, and so this gives it, I'd say, a certain angle and a certain emphasis on these factors. I just want to add another thing. So when the way we practice this, I mean, there's ways to do this on very different levels. So it at the heart of it, that's why I keep saying that it's kind of it's a philosophy and it's principles and it's evidence based, but it's really the reflection, right? It's having people reflect on these kinds of issues, these kinds of principles. That's what we're hoping to do, and you can do this through a workshop. I mean, you could bake this into your existing scoping. Existing way of doing governance. There's a lot of ways to this. What we want is people being reflective and acknowledging that being reflective and critical thinking and level-headed is really the only way forward here in a technology that's you could say overhyped and keep pushing the boundary and keep pushing ahead on us as organizations. There's no way you're going to be able to keep up to that hype. So you're going to have to make choices, right? You're going to have to do. I don't know if you need a strategy or not. That's another conversation. But you need choices and you need critical awareness about what you're doing. So stay ahead of the hype.
I can't help but thinking that maybe there's also something here, because now I just thought about, what if we said to just after the Second World War, we got a lot of tractors into Denmark. You remember that was it's influx of tractors.
Yeah.
So what if here's a tractor for you, dear farmer. By the way, I just need to sit down and think about my creativity and my responsibility. Is it also because we are in a world that is so complex and is strange that STAIR becomes relevant? Would it even be relevant in that setting with the tractor and the farmer?
That's a rhetorical question. Sorry, I'm making this a short answer,
Yeah.
Louise, but okay. I take that as a rhetorical question because it is because the technology is what it is. It's close to who we are cognitively, how we work, how we think, what we are as humans. It's so close to what we define ourselves. When we talk about who we are professionally as humans, what we do, how we work, how we think, how we decide.
Yeah, and the tractor doesn't do that.
A tractor, after all, doesn't do that. So obviously, I think you could actually use some of the principle. You could do that in everything, but okay, let's not get crazy, right? So,
but I just had a lot of fun with my thought experiment. Saying, there's the tractor. No, but let's just sit down and talk first, right?
I need rules.
What are the ethical issues of this tractor?
Exactly.
There's going to be ethical issues. I mean,
so what happens 20 years from now when the tractor breaks down and I don't even know how to do it manually anymore?
When the tractor when the tractor becomes autonomous,
and we don't have any oxen anymore to pull the plow. What do we do then? Guys.
Yeah. We go back to the ox.
So there is this STAIR is also to some extent then a response, Louise, to a complexity in the world today, in enterprise worlds.
Yeah, and I would also say because this
like agility is for development,
generative AI will develop so fast that the paradigm we have used for the last many years around technology introduction, development, and adoption, we simply don't have, the right paradigm to introduce this type of new technology in an organization. We shouldn't even call it introduce it. It should simply be integrating it. And then, of course, to serve the purpose of, participation and upskilling, you need to bring people in on that discussion. It cannot come from the IT department alone, or the data scientists who have trained the models themselves and found out, okay, with this model we can replace this.
From a C-level mandate or board mandate?
You can't, but you will, of course, or you will always meet some kind of resistance, or you will take something away from people. And I think that with the pace that this has to take, we need to address people issues in another way that we have done for many, many years in adopting technology. And we cannot leave it just to the innovators in our companies. They are like 3 or 4% of the employees. And if we are lucky, they are role models for the next segment that will take it in. But that is so slowly.
But also, I think Thor, I've referenced him a lot on the podcast actually, because he talked about the innovation theaters that we're having. A lot of companies where you put some innovators in some some room, like classroom, like we are in right now actually, and then they do innovation, and the rest of the company is not really adopting it because it's something they do, and then we go around looking at them like, oh, it's so interesting what they're doing. Let me get back to my Excel sheet. So
the citizen
exactly.
developers.
No, innovators, people who are innovating, people who are sitting there with we work
kind of the obvious, the opposite.
I spoke to someone who worked in a big bank once who said that we have 50 people sitting doing things we don't know what they're doing.
Right.
No one knows, but they're like very cool. Right? And
exactly, and I feel so.
Let me go back to But so we need to get beyond that to some extent and latch onto the people in the companies, right? I always say that if your most busy employees is using AI, then it's a success. Not if your innovators is using it, right? Or using it.
Yeah.
Martin,
I think you coined the phrase, or maybe I'm attributing it wrong. That what we're experiencing is in a sense backward implementation, right?
But I said that. Yes, so I said we are backwards implementing AI because it was adopted, and now we need to figure out the principles.
Precise,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think the conversation you're going to have in a lot of organizations is, so we have our governance system, which is kind of deterministic, rule based. It's project based. We choose what projects, and these can be huge projects or smaller projects. But there's this sense of control. And this is also happening, obviously, with generative AI, and it's going to happen. And this could be very top-down, obviously, that the board or management level decides what they want to invest in, right? So, but at the same time, you're going to have this more organic process, right, where it grows out into the organization, and we're actually putting this into the hands of everybody. So here's a GPT. Now here's a custom GPT functionality, and so this is what we're giving to people, and we can try, to instruct them and give them some guidelines and ideas, how to use it. But down the line, every individual is going to find their own smart way of using this, which could be super, super specialized. And so you're going to have all these domains, subdomains, these niches.
Yeah, and there becomes a conversation right between these, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you need what we're saying. You need some way to deal with both of these processes. So you have the project based, but you also kind of have this organic kind of flow of the technology out in the organization. And as you said, complexity. So this kicks up the complexity and the unpredictability in the organization, to an extreme degree.
But let's get a little bit practical then, Martin. So how did it actually work for you? There was a reason what prompted you to develop STAIR, leading 30 employees, right?
Yeah.
And what now? Is everyone just happily aligned and jumping
I think
on
so. We actually did surveys. We did, but yeah, actually. So I would maintain that. So we actually did some surveys. We did surveys initially when we started early 2023, and we did at the end of our learning program a year or so later, and it did. I think the approach we had and the way we talked about it and facilitating this room for discussion, and it's okay, to have considerations and I think we landed a place where we don't have this fear of the technology, but we're not in any haste at the same time. So we're also saying to people we're not in any haste because we want to do this, smart. We want to be smart about it. We want to be intelligent about it, and we want to use this where it makes sense. And it's been more and more evident to me that the technology is not at the level we need it to be in order for it. In our line of work, it would be a lot to do with content. There's the obvious stuff that everybody's using it for, summarization and stuff like this. But to actually put it into work, creating content, actual content that we're going to put out into the city of Copenhagen, right? We need a certain level of quality, and we're still getting there.
We're only 2 years away from AGI then, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought it was a joke. Exactly. I don't know. It's really weird, right? You can't even write a memo about garbage disposal in Copenhagen municipality that makes you happy, but we're still 2 years away from AGI. There's something doesn't rhyme sometimes. Right? I feel anyway.
Yeah,
but that's
because it needs this. It needs to know what's going on around it right now, and obviously an LLM currently they don't.
Yeah.
So, but these were the kind of conversations we had, and these were the demands we set. So, we also thought that's one thing, looking at ourselves. So we needed a way to talk about this, but we also needed a way to advise our organization, or we wanted to advise our organization because we wanted, we have the perspective saying, so as communicators, and this doesn't only go for communicators, but I would say it certainly goes for communicators, that our job is to advise our organization to maintain its legitimacy, to maintain it has to be understandable, it has to be actionable, it has to be legitimate, it has to take a lot of things into consideration. This is what communication, good communication and strategic communications is about. Or we need, to influence people to make different choices.
But I need to be, because I spoke to some of your employees once, and if you remember, we had this session where I spoke to them, and one of the things I think was interesting was that they put up these very high expectations for it to be writing everything, and I said, but there's also value in just saying, do you have a call to action? Do you remember to have the right tone of voice? Are you
right?
Are you making people angry? Are you are you missing something you can't see yourself? Right. That kind of review. Mm-hmm. But they didn't find that valuable either. Because what I'm hunting here is obviously that you gave them room to talk, and now they said no. I'm much better myself than this AI, right?
Yeah. So I think a lot of this has got to do. So it's I think case in point, it's very individual, and people are adopting it in very different speeds and in different ways. But just to finish the point I wanted to make before that, so as advisors to our organization, we also wanted a methodology and we wanted to communicate to the organization, you need to be critical thinking about this. And I think it's probably going to be 2025, maybe 2026 before I think that organizations, if this whole hype about agents is true, agents or whatever, but if people start adopting generative AI personally in their personal workflows, we're going to see a lot of different weird effects, I'd say, and then I'm quite sure that this critical thinking and this way of putting this into a method is something that's...
But I also think that maybe I'm being a little bit unfair to you, right? Because I don't think that the purpose here, right, and you must correct me also, Louise, if that it's not necessarily everyone adopts it and is just happy, jolly, going AI crazy, but rather that they feel comfortable taking the discussions when it arrives at their doorstep in a few years. They know what this is. We've been speaking about this. I know what to ask from it, and I know what I would expect as a person from it as well. Yeah. So, and a lot of places this is not happening. It's not even it's not legitimized. It's not talked about. It's something that's fear mongering or whatever it is. And they don't even. My wife is a teacher, and it's taken a long time for her to see where she could maybe use it a little bit. Even though I speak sometimes about AI. So there's actually some things we just don't talk about at home, and AI is weirdly enough often one of them. Yep. But just seeing how
it's your safe haven also, maybe.
But down the line, make it but it's something obviously then becomes a mansplaining thing because Lasse is just talking about AI, right? Yeah. But also making sure that it's something that she or someone would feel comfortable talking about later on, so it doesn't become something they are sort of objecting or just pushing away, instinctively, but actually engaging them in the conversation.
So if you just imagine teachers at a school having a seminar where they go through with a lot of use cases around how can you improve yourself as a teacher with these different use cases. What are the value? How would you replace perhaps the social relations that you were fearing when we were not talking about it? How would you now replace the social relations? And together with your colleagues have that conversation, write these use cases up on the STAIR board. Who's working with them, who's driving them, what are the considerations that we as a teacher cohort in this school wants to do with our profession.
Yeah, but I think, and this brings me to, now I'm talking about my wife again. She read a book during her studies called The Road to Subject Matter Language, or something like that, specialized language, right? For children. So, and contrary to how a lot of tech evangelism is happening, where it starts off with the chat about technology, I'd like to talk to you about AI now. It actually always starts with making the kids talk about the subject with the words they know. They speak.
Yeah.
And then you add words to it. You add these subject matter words to it, these very specialized words. And then the success is if these kids then talk back to you again,
using
those new words,
adding
reflections to the way they've initially understood it, and that's how you actually move kids into a higher, specialized language about things. And it's sort of the same thing we're doing here, isn't it?
Yes, I think that's a very good
analogy.
Analogy, exactly. Because what I do myself, I use these principles, but in a very flowing, I don't really reflect upon them, But when I start to replace something that I used to do as a researcher, it could be writing an abstract, or it could be, sitting there and writing the tedious list of references, or, whatever. And then I find an AI model that can help me. Then I actually do reflect whether this makes me smarter or dumber. And whether can I proudly stand on a scene tomorrow and say that this is my thinking work, whatever it's called. And if I can't, then I'm actually trying to withhold myself.
But it's also something about conscience sometimes, isn't it? That you're afraid. I don't know. I feel all the time that is something. What if someone calls me out on it? What if Jesus saw me do this? I don't know.
But at some point, of course, it's
Did
only...
I cheat?
Of course, it's only important if you at a certain point can't explain why this is on your PowerPoint. and people are,
I had the same thing, right? But then I felt like, but what I'm trying to write now is generic.
yeah.
Sometimes you just write generic stuff, and then I thought,
I don't.
what?
No.
Come on, Louise. Sometimes we do. Okay, just accept. I never do that either. But I heard someone, a friend of mine, sometimes write generic stuff. But then I just realized it. But I can, because I kept on being like looking for the gold nugget, right? And it was like, but this text, this particular part of the text doesn't require a gold nugget. It just requires blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like, okay, but ChatGPT does this brilliantly, so it's actually okay now. I'm trying to teach myself that as well. And then I always try to use it for my creative process, criticizing my writing, giving me ideas for when I'm stuck somewhere. Can you help me move on?
Exactly.
And also sometimes I say, now I don't need AI to move me on. Now I actually need to stop, go for a run, think, go back, because sometimes it's also about me figuring out which route should I take, not necessarily which routes are open. It's very difficult, right? And it's not difficult either, right? Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. And it's made absolutely no difference. I don't know if you know that poem by Robert Frost, but sometimes it just. Is it also because maybe we take ourselves too serious, Louise? Don't you think? Oh, that's a terrible question.
That's and a very big question. I would say that I don't think the world needs us humans to move further away from, how do you say, reality. By sitting, using an AI assistant, collaborating, doing our work together with that. I don't think that should be the goal. Because I think we as humans need to take part in the world. And I don't see us doing that using
But isn't that what
AI.
we do with all technology all the time?
Well,
if it's an assistant, if it's not an agent anyway, if it's just an assistant.
Could be, and a year or two from now, you will be having a very intelligent conversation with your assistant. I know that, and you might feel that it is a genuine human conversation that you have. At that point, you might be, experiencing the same happiness, emotions that if you spoke with a real person. But we're not there yet. And we have so much evidence that just, speaking with an AI or working with an AI makes people genuinely unhappy, isolated, depressed. So let's not, in the hype of this, create work we know will have, on a very, short time, will create humans that are depressed.
I
know I'm taking it way too, but
you're taking it far out, yes.
Yeah.
And I'm also, it's going to be interesting to see how this one, matures over the next 10 years, Louise.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play this back to you in 10 years and say, do you still agree? Now, and you'll be like, Lasse, I don't even know. I don't even hear what you're saying because I'm talking to my AI assistant. So just be like, But it also, I have this episode with Carl Friston that's coming out in a couple of days, which you didn't hear, obviously, because it's not out yet. But the point is that he says that something like the social media is ruining the way that we are exploring the world and engaging with things that we did not predict. So we get better at reacting to the unpredictable and then get better living organisms to some extent, right? And this echo chamber, this just seeing the same thing all the time is actually a really, really bad thing for us. It talks about we should be better at listening to jazz, not listening to Billie Holiday, but listening to jazz in general, because we know how to listen to things that are unpredictable, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of the same thing you're hunting there, isn't it?
It is. You just put it much more eloquently.
Did I tell you I am powered by ChatGPT? That's why you really like my.
Yeah.
But Martin, you've been trying to say things for a while now.
But I love this conversation, and so it's brilliant. But look, I think what's
Do you agree with Lisa, by the way?
I certainly agree with Carl Friston. No, I agree. I agree I don't think I have this binary view on. I'm sorry. I'm considering.
Great.
But it's kind of saying that it's kind of do or die using the technology. For me, it's always a kind of a gradient, and it's messy, and sometimes it's going to be great, and sometimes it's not going to be great. And I have a hard time putting into a system like that, way of thinking about it. But what is important to me, and that's where I agree completely with Louise, is this critical thinking about it, that you're able to be in critical thinking about it. And the example you gave before, Lasse, is also, I think you have a great intuition about these things. You work with it, obviously. You talk a lot about it. You reflect on it, and you know that I know Carl Friston, and that's I think also what he's talking about here is you're kind of, you could say, you're granularly high, complex models, world models of what you imagine, and the more intuition, the more complex your intuition of generative AI, or if AI, the AI you're using is, the better equipped you'll be to ask the right questions and to make the right choices. So this is what it's about. It's creating this intuition. So when we're talking about managers and top managers and C management and board levels deciding all this stuff, or even IT specialists. So this is not where this is developing. We talked about earlier the organic way this is developing. So what's your strategy as an organization to empower the user to do this kind of governance? So where does this put governance, right? So that's. But
is your real worry really that, about the new employees coming into the workplace, because they'll be growing up with it, they'll have an intuition, they know this by heart, so they also know what not to expect from it. So, to some extent, that's been with Facebook and everything else. My kids are not on Facebook.
Oh, but
it doesn't matter. They sort of know what to say no to, right? But to a degree, they do, right? Whereas the older generation, they either resist it aggressively, or they just stumble into it like elephants that's crashing everything and don't know what they're doing. I don't know. Are we trying to change the existing, or
We're trying to change the existing. We're trying to. So you can see, STAIR for me would be superfluous. When it comes to the point that this becomes so intuitive for everyone, that they know that we have to take these considerations, we have to ask these kind of questions. That would be great. I mean, and that's not too much to hope for, actually, because this is the way in communications in general we're used to as communicators. I just want to add that everybody does communication, right? So now we have to get used to everybody does AI. So, and the way we deal with that in communication, so we can't go around to everyone, each and everyone, saying you have to write exactly like this. So we have to find ways of trying to inspire people and to build their intuition on communications.
Yeah, but then also moving it. My point is just we're moving it with the generation. So, Louise, did everyone become worse at math after we got the calculator? Is that your point?
Yes, definitely.
You think so?
Or at least doing it ourselves.
But we've never made more things with mathematics in the world.
Yes, we can. But that is really not my point. Whether you can use a calculator or not.
I'm also simplifying it
yes,
here, right?
Because
very
that
polemic,
is
sorry.
Yeah, and I don't find that analogy proper.
No,
because this is not a tool. We can start using it as a tool. That would, to me, be using our old paradigm. But very, very fast, it will become something else. And we need to build that paradigm, that new paradigm of understanding what artificial intelligence is while we are using it. And this is just, the very, very beginning of it. But why not begin a critical, reflective movement that can be, that can make sure that all of this new technology can be built upon human values?
But the funny thing is, I share your sentiment, right? I also said it. So my problem right now is that this is the 46th episode, I think, of The Only Constant, and I can't run from my previous episodes that are out there, where I also say that AI is a hack on language to some extent, and language constitutes civilization and organization. I'm a historian, right? So I'm also a little bit weird in this space, but. So I share your fear, because I know that calculators like math. Math is something on the edge of what we do. It's a tool to what we do. But language is sometimes it seems like it's all we do. I don't think that's right. But people, half of the population at least, think in language. I've heard that the other half don't. Which recently was like, how do you then think if you don't? I don't get that. Let's not get into that. But that's actually the thing. If you read about it, half of the population don't think in language.
Yeah.
So
But
They think in pictures and colors and
emotion. I don't.
and
I
emotions.
have
we
Yeah.
just agreed not to get into that.
Yeah. So yeah.
That's a rabbit hole.
But my point is, this is a hack on everything. So I just feel at one point this positivity to see it can enable so much good, but also this weird tingling fear that what are we actually hacking here, right?
Well, I would say that I'm not trying to speak about this by creating or by fearing it. I'm not fearing the technology, but I'm I would fear if we are as naive as we was with social media.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So why not learn from what we...
You talk about social media like the past tense. Social media is very much a part of this AI revolution too,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it is, of course. It has, yeah.
So the confluence of social media and now, as I think Meta said before Christmas that they're going to add agents to the feeds that actually scares me a little bit. And I feel like such a boomer at 41.
Yeah. So yeah.
Can I just add that because I agree, and it's not really a question if technology is inherently good or bad, but it's the use of technology and it's what it does to us, and it's this situation which is it's muddled. It's difficult to confine. So it's not a question again. Is it good or bad? It's being reflective, being critical thinking, and
no, because when you're right, when you work with communicators, right, and head up a communication department, but all those people are good at writing. That's why they have their jobs, probably, right? But there's a lot of people who can't write. A lot of dyslexic people out there. A lot of people who don't know the language and all that. The sheer enablement from using AI for these people is that's just a almost bulletproof, surefire idea out there. That's fantastic.
That's
exactly.
fantastic.
And we can't miss out on that because we're saying, but the balancing act of figuring out when or not when, or when are we adding more value to a thing, and when are we reducing the value of it? And that's not just for people and humans. That's also for processes. And sometimes we have a process working well, but now we added AI to it. Why? Just because.
And Louise said, I think I just want to go back to what you said from the offset, Louise, that we need doing STAIR or doing this kind of critical thinking and talking about it. You need this base level of understanding of the technology. And I just want to iterate. I'm certainly not saying in communications wise that there are no good use cases even for communications. It's about finding the good use cases. So it's a probabilistic thing, right? Where do we need this variation? Where don't we need this variation? Where is our communication really predictable? And a lot of communication a lot of professional strategic communications is actually very predictable and follows certain structures. So it's all about finding the right areas to do it and just not forging ahead. Only fools rush in. I guess that's the point.
But I can't help
falling in love, right? Yeah, and certainly I am also in love with this technology. I don't know if I should finish this, but Louise, you can leave the room now. But I was talking about AI. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay. But
you should probably edit that out.
Well, no, definitely not. This is beautiful, right? This is a human meeting, Martin.
Right. And unpredictable things will happen.
That's what happens. That
conversation takes weird turns.
That is what shows that we are not GPTs sitting there, or are we? Maybe they would also take their weird turns.
I don't know what I am, but
but will we? If we, with STAIR, will we become obsolete in the future? Do you think, guys? That's throwing it out there. AGI, ASI, agentics.
As workers, as creating value through work, earning our money by doing.
You've just seen. I don't know if you've seen WALL-E, the movie, where they're just sitting on couches and drinking drinks and not thinking. Can't even move their bodies anymore.
It's definitely a scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How likely is it?
I don't know. But I'm not. I'm more into describing which future that I would like to push to, because I don't believe that there is a distant future, but we can all push in that direction where we want the future to go. Just like how to say, future scientists.
But
That is what they do.
Yeah, but the reason I think is on, because you form your opinion. You're a scientist, and you form your opinion around the data that you have, and that's also why I'm saying, how will the future? What do we know? What does technology do to people, and what will it do to people with this kind of technology? What do you think is it? And it's, I know it's a really big question, right?
It is.
And you already said that you think it's bad if it's something we chat with, right? So I don't want you to go
if it's unregulated, and then I think it can be put to really bad use. But we can also use it to come up with solutions for our bigger challenges, and then we, perhaps can invent things that address the climate issues and poverty, whatever we see as how do you say, dangers of
Threats
of humanity and whatever. But
the answer I would have loved that you gave, I realize now, is that maybe saying that, okay, but how far out is this even, right? I still have to do my time registrations manually at work, right? I can't have it make anything neat in PowerPoint, and it still gives me crappy graphical figures if I ask it to do anything. So are we even close to an AGI? Are we even close to this replacement? Companies have been talking about being digital first and data driven for the last 15 years. How many succeeded?
Yeah, not that many actually, and that is because of bounded automation, that we as humans can actually not take that many, technology adoptions at a time. We have to adapt. But now we have a technology that can take over. That can take over large amounts of tasks that can be automated, fully automated.
seemingly.
Yeah, but there is a lot of algorithms that decides for us just during the day, right?
Yeah, 20 years ago, I thought about this the other day, 25 years ago maybe, there was no algorithms running my life. Today, they decide my Google Maps journey. They decide my friends on social media.
Exactly.
I think that's how we met Martin actually as well, right?
I think it's actually a human in between.
Oh, okay, really? Okay.
Called Adam.
Oh, that's good. That's nice. That's a good one. But also love, not to mention the song we sang before, Martin, but love, on Tinder, it's also an algorithm choosing who you meet. It's politics, what are you exposed to? It's in consumerism, all the products we see and are exposed to is also run by an algorithm more and more all the time.
Yeah.
Algorithms run so many things today.
It does. Right? And
do people even realize this?
Only if they take their time thinking about it, but which is why I think we need much more, awareness, so that we can, so we know what is happening, and also to educate ourselves, to push for a future that we would love to be a part of, or at least our grandchildren. And so I know it sounds perhaps naive,
but I think the future and the promise of generative AI, I think, is that we are moving from a world where, if we take the IT world as something that's a given, the reason the IT we've had for 40, 50 years is that we've had humans in the center of the process running. You can also always put the process at the center, but let's say we put the human in the center, and then we use tools for functionalistic purposes all the time. So we go to our ERP to do this, we go to our calculator to do this, we go to our email system to. So we use technology ad hoc as we get these technologies, right? But now suddenly we have open architecture software systems, right, that can talk to each other, and now we have AI as well to run things and manage and be an agent in the middle. So instead of having the human at the center and technology at the edge, we're sort of switching maybe to having technology at the center and humans on the edge, and then maybe pushing us out, right? That is the fear, right? Isn't it? That transition.
But I would say that when you have, algorithms talking to algorithms, deciding, or when you have used generative AI to write a job application, and then when you send this job application in, it will be read by another AI, and you will be filtered based on an algorithm, right? And then at some point you might get an email back.
But I just think that seems like a superfluous process, right? Why are we even doing it?
Yes, exactly. And so HR, human resource departments, are also talking about, is this really the way we find the best person for the job? Or should we reinvent the entire job application process, because perhaps we have gotten a little bit too far? But that is automation, where some core processes that previously defined what human resource was pretty much about is now being taken completely over, and human resource needs to invent.
We're in the loop,
but
if they need us,
or invent the self.
But Louise, I think you're also alluding to something here that there may be fluctuations here. I think I'm generally optimistic, and there may be these kind of fluctuations, and we're hitting certainly one of them now. The example you give there is brilliant, I think, but also that the output may be that we actually invent new processes that are a lot better, that are more humanistic, that are more qualitatively better processes. So, and we may take a detour there adopting this new technology.
Yeah.
And but that's still fundamentally an optimistic, positive view for the future. I think that we may be going through some rough rides right now, and certainly if we're not critical and aware, it's going to be unnecessarily rough, right? But we may still be inspired by this technology, adapt to it, and make demands to the technology, and find ourselves someplace better.
But I heard someone say today that there's this whole, we need to be more fluctuative and fluid in the way we have our job roles as well. So if you do something, you can also help out here and be a little bit more. We're very strictly,
I agree very
department structured, role structured, budget structured in our companies. We need to be more fluid. Yeah. But at the same time, if we move into a world in which AI will run the core processes and we'll be on the edge, we'll just be specialized functions that the AI will call upon. So maybe we don't need to be more fluid, but actually be more specialized.
So we're going to be the autonomous agent.
We are going to be going to be the IT to IT that IT used to be for us.
Yeah.
We will be IT supporters.
We will be functionalistic, ad hoc apps in a world of in a world of AI agents.
But that is actually also one of the
That's a dystopian. Sounds like right, but it isn't. But
But there's this cycle that we also teach in when we teach how to integrate AI, and also how leaders help employees integrate AI. And the first question you ask is, where do you think AI can automate some of your tasks, and where can it augment you? So you first find out how you can be augmented, and then what you can get rid of. And then the last question you ask is actually, where shouldn't it be used? And those three questions gives you a lot of, power as not only an employee, but also as a leader to flush out what is worth automating. How do we augment people to become specialists? Because then they will be specialists. And where shouldn't we use AI? Because it will, how would you say, be critical to our mission. If we use AI in this particular part. If we do have a mission. Yeah. So and then performance reviews will also change. Because it's not a performance review every year. It might be every 3 months, because just these three questions will have different answers after 3 months.
But some of the problems is that if we start by they're doing this right now with the novel technology, saying where can it be used and where shouldn't it be used, we will also restrict ourselves from what everyone did, initially with the internet and everything else, and made silly use cases. Right? I saw an image I posted also the other day where some people used webcams, very early webcams, to monitor if there was coffee on the coffee machine. I think actually maybe that was in Denmark they did that. I realized afterwards because a professor at the Copenhagen University said that, I remember this webcam. Like, whoa,
Thomas Hildebrand.
I was like, whoa, did you? He was also on the podcast earlier. But like, okay, so this was from your department?
That was my coffee.
Yeah, it's my coffee. That's my coffee. I remember that coffee machine. But love that one. Oh, nice. But my point is that of course, it shouldn't be used to do that. But doing that also meant it became a gimmick people saw and reflected upon. So
so it's going to be organic and it's going to be unpredictable, and there are going to be silly use cases, and that's not
and
so
dangerous use cases.
And
as well.
but that's what you want to weed out, right? And we're going to make mistakes. That's what I meant before. There's going to be fluctuation. We're going to make mistakes, and we should try, not to make the really big mistakes. Right? We said fools rush in. There's also this, notion of if you rush too quickly, you're gonna what do you call it? Move fast, break things. Don't move fast, break people. For instance, right? Let's just to try to focus on not breaking people in the process, not losing too much of our worth. So this is what we want to do: hone in on the most important stuff. But we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to experiment, and we're going to make silly use cases also.
Yeah, remember.
And I don't think that's not inherently a problem.
No, it's just this whole, trying out things and then seeing, and we need to be able to do that without necessarily
creating too much damage.
The problem is that technology. My problem is that we always. I said this also early, that we always somehow rooted in what we already know and do, and we already. I think everyone is, no matter how innovative they call themselves, is a little bit change resistant, right? We like what we're good at. We like to keep on being good at it. It's comfortable to some extent. So asking people, what shouldn't it do immediately? It could also be, detrimental. But of course, sometimes you shouldn't do things, right? I had a phone a couple of years ago back that put in a camera that could give you light outside the visible spectrum, which and it was fun. But then they realized that it could be used to look underneath women's clothes if they had light clothes on.
Why? Why?
Because heat is also light, right?
Right.
So they had to make quickly an update and just deactivate the camera. So I had a phone, expensive phone, it's OnePlus, that had a deactivated camera because it could take pictures of. Yeah. It was infrared. It did pick up some infrared light, right? Wow. No, not infrared. Below. Yeah.
X-ray.
X-ray. Yeah. X-ray. It's super weird, right? So sometimes you shouldn't do it just because you can, right?
Right.
Well, sometimes you also try things.
Yeah.
That was a weird anecdote anyway, but I actually think it's a really
just
fun
remember
story.
One of the fluctuations, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think what you're doing here is you're actually trying to make a conversation, right? And we have the AI Act in the EU, right? So I want to ask you also, and maybe that's more for you, Louise. Are we regulating what we should be more having a conversation around right now in the EU? What do you think? That's a hot potato.
Yeah. But I actually do like the approach of regulation, and I think they found a good balance of not making it too rigid.
But you understand where I'm coming from with the question, right?
Yes, because people believe it will stifle innovation.
And stifle the conversation as well.
But what I can see and sense is that more people than ever, is trying to understand what will the legal requirements be. And not just the legal department, but we as humans would also like to understand what are the the level of I don't know why I don't remember that name now. Risks. Because it gives us a way to talk about it also. So we can talk about whether this is a low-risk AI or high-risk AI, or how we, approach the generative AI paragraph.
But challenging you a little bit, shouldn't we have had a discussion? They came up with this AI Act, and it was very quickly after ChatGPT came out, they started drawing up the contours, and then you go through all the EU hearings and all that, right? And now we already have it. I think it's very quickly for an EU process.
Yeah.
Did they have this conversation? Did they have, STAIR reflection? They had the reflection. Did they have the Socio-Technical AI reflections? Did they even have the time to do that before they came up with a regulation?
No, but as I read the EU AI Act, it's not about generative AI.
No.
There is only one paragraph around generative AI.
But it still seems a little,
It's much more about AI.
But you see the timing that I'm hunting
Yeah. So I think they succeeded in perhaps writing in a too strict paragraph around generative AI. So if you use generative AI, or you are a developer of AI and a user of AI, you need to have You need to know what stands in the EU AI Act.
But do you think are the politicians of the EU having these socio-technical AI reflections that they need to have?
I would say that in the latest report on how AI should be used in government, they have a very human approach towards how, at what levels, which type of AI can be used and should be used, and how leaders and managers and employees and citizens, of course, how they will meet AI. And I think it's, how I remember, it's very considerate. And
that's also a different story than just the US innovates, China replicates, and the EU regulates.
Yeah,
this is US innovates, China replicates, and the EU has a serious discussion about this. Is that what you're trying to say we're doing? You must have something you could wish for more of, right?
Well, I'm sad that we have that, because it will become a prophecy, a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I actually do think that regulation, just as we can see in the research we do, that humans are asking for what are the rules and regulations, because they are considerate around how can we use it without harming somebody or someone. So I think, but I'm also a European, right?
Yeah,
and I'm brought up in a regulatory
but I can still say, I
world
want more constructive standards. I've said this multiple times to multiple people. So I think regulations is fine, but if we don't follow up with standards, right? There's so many things that are not digital across the board in the EU.
Exactly.
I think we're in Denmark, where it's highly digital, right? In Germany, just below the board, you can. It's like, I don't know, 5 meters of being digital and being absolutely non-digital. And then you're across the border. It's really weird, right? Why aren't we following up with that? Are we then having the dialogues we need to have, right? I just think, there's some constructive thing we could do with this way we are approaching things in general, because we are sort of gathering power, we're making a melting pot. Why don't we make STAIR a guiding principle for the EU, right?
I think we should do that. No, what I would say is actually being a researcher and a teacher at universities, teaching digital transformation for many, many years. I find it so, concerning that we're not more interested to have a discussion around digitalization on a societal level. It took so many years before political parties actually had a digitalization chairman, something like that. I think it was the radical left were the first.
And we've had a digital minister in Denmark for some time, right? But only
now,
recently she has opinions. They have opinion, right?
Yeah. So and so that is definitely on on the back heel that we are sort of coming in with having politicians that will drive a debate. And I think also now that we as citizens want to participate in this debate. 20-25 years
but it's later,
crazy, right?
Right?
And there's a dominant discourse, obviously, on productivity and maximizing gains, and there's industry pushing it, and there's hype, and there's a lot of things.
And being afraid of China and
being
the
afraid
US,
of China, geopolitical issues, and so there's a lot of different discourse pulling it in very.
But also just realizing that we have now, we have a metaverse. I always said metaverse is not a product that someone develops. It's a thing that appears as we just do it to some extent. And now we have that, right? We have a digital infrastructure where if you don't pay Google, Facebook, Amazon some money each month, your shop doesn't exist, right? You just boarded. The mob will just go around and just close down your shop. You're not here.
Yeah.
Right. So we have this, but the discussions around it, the politicians are willing to discuss roads, right? You are in the technical environmental department, right? But they don't discuss Google ads, which is the main street of the world today, right?
Unless Google threatens to close 1% of the media coverage in Denmark, then we're on our heels, right?
Yeah, but I think that discussion is so.
No, but that goes to
important,
prove
right?
the point that it is, in a sense, critical structure, critical infrastructure, right? So we need to be aware of this.
Yeah.
So I think this has been a great conversation. I think we've gone far and wide. I think also we've had Louise a little bit on her heels here. I feel like that, right?
On the barricades.
Martin was just quick to say, I'm quite positive. I think we use for good things. So back to you, Louise. How do you feel it's gonna? So you're negative, right?
Yeah.
So, and what do you want to say to EU, where you're now applying for funds for your new research project? I think EU is doing a great job. Anyway, that's a bad joke. But I think this has really been a really splendid conversation. I think we've gone far and wide. I think we've covered a lot of the topics around what it actually means to enable change, what it means to be a human when things are changing, and change resistance, and why it is not just that. Why it's about leveling a field as well, where everyone can be part of the conversation, so we can change the entire ecosystem and not just the innovators, right?
Yeah.
And I want to say thank you both for joining me today. And then I obviously, and I know you've been looking very much forward to this, I have my final question as well, which I want to ask you in sequence, right? So I'm going to ask you, Louise, first, because I want to end on a positive note.
Okay. Thank you, Lasse.
Sorry.
Thank
I'm joking.
Yeah.
I'm obviously joking. So, so are you ready for it?
Yes, I am.
Louise, what is the only constant?
Participation. In terms of having a participatory mindset, ask people in, invite workers, families, friends in to have a debate, to have a discussion around how to and how not to address or invite this technology into your life. So, and that's also what I believe that the socio-technical perspective fundamentally is about, how you participate in the changes that can be fundamental, disruptive. And then having an aim on not only making life easier and for people, but also better. So a participatory mindset.
That's a really great constant. And it also reflects very neatly on the whole conversation we've had today. And this is so fundamental that the change is something that happens to people. Innovation might be tech-driven, but change is always people-driven, right? So I really thank you for that constant.
Welcome.
And Martin, are you ready for your?
Yes.
So Martin, what is the only constant?
So I would love to say entropy, because we've talked about complexity. We've talked about this notion of dealing with this complexity. But I really want to approach. I thought about this from a human perspective. Also, I know that you're having Carl Friston on the show, and I want to celebrate that as well. And the term that keeps coming back to me is unpredictability. So this is from a human perspective. This is the world we live in, and I don't know if it's a high note or a positive note or a low note, but that's a constant for us. The world is fundamentally unpredictable, and we need to navigate in this. And it's not inherently good. It's not inherently bad. It's an agnostic observation, really, that we just have to deal with this unpredictability. Sometimes the unpredictable is a fantastic thing, right? We talked about LLMs and using it for the right use cases. It could be a fantastic thing that it's stochastic and it's probabilistic. And sometimes it's a terrible thing if things are way too unpredictable. It becomes it's not complex anymore. It's just chaos. And then it can hurt you. But we need to navigate the unpredictability, and we need to acknowledge that the world is unpredictable. Even though you believe it's predictable, even though you try to make it predictable, it's still fundamentally unpredictable. And I think this is a fantastic thing. We just need to act accordingly.
That's a really good and deep answer, Martin. Thank you very much for that. And I think also it ties back to in some weird ways to yours, Louise, that the world is unpredictable. So the future is unpredictable. Everything that happens is unpredictable. So let's figure it out together by participating in the conversation, right?
Yes.
perfectly tied together.
Thank you both for participating in a great conversation with me today.
Thank you,
It's been a real
Lasse.
pleasure.
Thank you, Lasse.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.